Greetings, I'm Professor Hobo and welcome to another HOBOTECH product review. So riddle me this, what is a 2000 watt pure sine inverter, a 2000 watt hour lithium iron phosphate battery with a 10-year lifespan, and weighs more than a small child in scuba gear? It's the highly anticipated LEOCH solar generator, of course. Now I've been pummeled by dozens of requests over the last several weeks ever since this thing hit Indiegogo. Professor, please review the LEOCH. Well, I finally got my hands on one, it's here, and we're about to go check it out. So what comes in the box? That's it. That's right, all I got in the box was the AC charging cord. No manual, no paperwork, no solar charging cables, nothing. But let me explain. This is a prototype. There are only a handful of them in existence. They were sent around to influencers on YouTube to do reviews. They were quickly thrown together and shipped out. So it didn't come with any kind of documentation. I didn't get a PDF with any specifications. I had no idea what I was getting into until I started testing it. Now, if you don't know what Indiegogo is, it is a crowdfunding campaign like Kickstarter, where people can pledge and help out the campaign early on, and usually the prices go up over time. So you're not technically buying it, you're sort of pre-ordering it. So with that out of the way, what's in the LEOCH? The LEOCH sports a 2048 watt hour lithium iron phosphate battery with a rated 3000 cycle life. That means this thing will last you a solid 10 years if you charge it and discharge it every day. Now that's the big benefit to lithium iron phosphate, is that it has a lot more cycle life than typical lithium ion, which they put in products like Jackeries. Size and weight. Well, this case is actually the temporary case they're building it with, so they tell me that the final dimensions will be smaller in every direction, but this thing weighs a lot, at a whopping 68.4 pounds. Now the build quality, it's not very good, but that's because, again, this is a prototype. The final version is gonna have a different case, probably be thicker, probably be a lot more sturdy. Now the display is decent. It does show input and output watts and the typical 5-segment battery icon. It shows you the level of charge of the battery. Now one of the most fantastic features of the LEOCH is that it does sport a 2000 watt pure sine inverter with 4 outlets. This does have MPPT charging, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So there are 2 ways to charge this that I know of, because I didn't get any kind of documentation or any kind of specs to tell me otherwise. So I found out there's 2 ways to charge. First way is by AC wall outlet using that cord that I just showed you. And the second way is by solar. Now on the back of this, there is a solar input. It is an Anderson connector. So you can plug solar panels in directly that use Anderson, or you can get an adapter cord that allows you to do MC4 to Anderson. And that allows you to add up to 300 watts of solar. Do note that you're gonna have to run multiple solar panels in parallel. Now the max charge time for either or is 7 to 8 hours, because the AC input on this is limited to around 300 watts, and so is the solar input. There are 2 kinds of 12-volt outputs on this. Now the 12-volt on this is regulated at 12.2 volts. So there is one cigarette lighter socket rated at 8 amps, and then there are 2 6mm outputs rated at 3 amps. Now this has 6 USB ports total. 2 are standard USB-A, 2 are USB-A quick charge ports, and there are 2 60-watt power delivery ports. So they do say on the Indiegogo page that it'll charge a Tesla. For some reason, that's a big deal. Sure, it will charge a Tesla. It might buy you about 5 miles. They say 10 miles. I guess it depends on the model and if you're going downhill or have a tailwind or not. But that means you also have to carry around this giant, massive thing in your trunk that weighs 70 pounds. So is it really worth it to go an extra 5 miles? You tell me. Other features. This does actually have a UPS relay in it. That means it acts as a true UPS device. You can leave it plugged into the wall 24 hours a day, and it passes through that AC power directly to the outlets on the front. If the power goes out or gets cut off, the battery takes over to power the inverter. It's pretty cool. This also has wheels on the back to help you haul this massive thing around. And it comes with a very blingy and loud light show. Now, LEOCH claims that the production model list is going to have a 2-year manufacturer's warranty. And of course, I took the LEOCH into my secret laboratory where I performed all kinds of experiments on it that nearly destroyed it.
Final results of the LEOCH, or LEOCH, or however the heck you pronounce it. 2077 watt hours, 180 amp hours, total discharge time 21 hours, 50 minutes. And that's annoying as heck.
So you can see from the results, we got 2,077 watt hours out of a rated 2,048 watt hours. How is it possible to get more power out of a battery than what it's rated for? Pretty simple. LEOCH has constantly told me in every single email that, hey, it's no longer an 80 amp hour battery. It's actually like 92 amp hours or something like that. Now that was very confusing to me because I know that 2,000 watt hours does not equal 80 or 92 amp hours. It's more like 160 or 180 amp hours. Well, they're rating the battery at its nominal voltage, which is around 24 volts. So if they claim it has a 92 amp hour battery, that means it is 184 amp hours when you convert that to 12 volts. You see the results of our test is about 180 amp hours. So what they say is true. The battery is actually larger than 2,048 watt hours by a significant margin. So that explains the result we get. That also explains why this thing's so darn heavy. But this also means you can expect a full 2 kilowatts of usable battery out of this, out of the 12 volt port. The 12 volt cigarette lighter port is rated at 8 amps. So we're starting here at 8 amps. We're gonna go ahead and slowly turn it up until it shuts down. 8.5 amps. And there it goes, it shuts down. So as I mentioned before, the 12 volt output on this is regulated at 12.2 volts. Now LEOCH just announced yesterday on their own website that they are going to change the voltage on this to be 13 volts instead of 12.2. That'll make it fully compatible with every 12 volt thing on the market. So if you have a refrigerator or something that requires at least 12 volts, then this is going to cover you no problem. This next test is the pure sine wave check under load, where we're going to test to see how clean this inverter runs. So as you can see there, the sine wave is pretty clean. We're going to go ahead and use the solar degenerator heat gun to apply a load, and we'll watch and see what happens to the sine wave. Okay, that's looking pretty good. The sine wave stayed pure and the voltage and the hertz remained pretty constant. And as for the max charge rate test, I got a little story to tell you. So this next test is going to be the max charge rate test. How fast can we charge the LEOCH by changing the input voltage? Not, because the input on this no longer works. And let me explain why. So when LEOCH sent me this, they sent it to me in a box, no instructions, no specifications. They didn't send me a PDF file, absolutely nothing. It doesn't say anywhere on here any specifications. It doesn't say how many watts anything is, how much solar can take, how many watts of anything it can take, or volts. Now I know from the campaign page it says it takes 300 watts of solar, so we all are going to assume, at least I would assume, seeing this thing has a 2,000 watt hour battery and a 2,000 watt inverter, you would probably guess that it could handle at least 2 solar panels in series, or somewhere around 45 volts input on the solar. I mean, they're using an Anderson input, which is a high amp input, so I'm thinking, okay, it should take at least 45 volts. So I got my handy dandy variable voltage charger here, and I plugged it in and I started it around 12 volts. And this was all off camera, of course. I just unboxed it, like literally unboxed it, and went to hook it up to charge it because, let me explain something else. They sent me the wrong AC cable for the United States. They sent me this 20 amp, this very rare 20 amp plug, so I couldn't charge this. So I was thinking maybe I can just charge it with this until I can get the adapter. They sent me a bunch of these adapters which converts the 20 amp with the weird slot in it, if you can see that. It changes that to the regular standard 110 outlet for the United States. So that just plugs right onto the existing cable that they gave me. And then this plugs into the LEOCH. Now, this is not a standard cable that you would get like on a computer monitor or something. This is kind of proprietary. I've never seen this format before. It's probably European or Japanese. So I couldn't even use one of my existing cables to charge this. I had to use this cable. So instead of waiting 3 or 4 days for the adapter, I figured I'll just be smart and I'll charge it with my variable voltage charger, which I've used this on every other power station I've ever tested. It's never been a problem. I've never burned one up using the input voltage being too high. I've never had that happen till now. So what I did was I went ahead and I started this around 12 volts and I noticed it wasn't charging at all. So I went ahead and turned it up to like 18, 20 volts, and it started charging at 300 watts. And I'm like, okay, good, that's its maximum rate, but let's see what kind of voltage it'll take before it shuts off, or before it stops charging. So I went and turned it up to 40 volts, 45 volts, and it was still charging at 300 watts just fine for about 20 seconds. And then I heard this loud pop and crack, and then I smelled burnt electronics. And the input wattage dropped to 0. So I thought immediately, okay, maybe it was just a circuit breaker, because they have this circuit breaker back here. You think they put a circuit breaker on the solar input in case you overvolt it or overamp it, it's going to trip the breaker. Well, it does nothing. So I fried the solar input after I had this in my hands for no more than 2 minutes. And that made it impossible for me to charge it up and start my testing, because I wanted to start my testing the day I got it. I had to wait for them to send me this adapter cable. So once I got the adapter cable, I was able to charge it from AC power. So let's go ahead and plug it into AC power. I'll show you how fast it charged from AC, because obviously we can't demonstrate anything in the solar input. And they even gave me a 100-watt solar panel to plug into it to test, but you know, at the time when this thing came in, the weather was bad and it was cloudy. There's no way I could have plugged solar into it anyway, but I mean, just a 100-watt panel, it's going to take 20 hours, actually 25 hours on a 100-watt solar panel to charge this. So who in the world is going to do that? So here it is charging from AC power, 280 watts. The fact that it's a 2,000 watt-hour battery means that 280 watts, you're looking at almost 8 hours to charge this thing from dead. That's a pretty long time, seeing modern standards are 3 to 4 hours. In fact, the Blue Eddy charges way faster than this, and of course the EcoFlow products there are also known to charge very quickly. Now I found this very amusing, because once I saw what the amp rating was on the input, I was excited. I thought this thing was going to charge at like 15 or 1800 watts like an EcoFlow would. So here's the amusing text right here. It says AC input 115 volts at 20 amps max. Why would it say 20 amps max and this thing only charges at 280 watts from AC power? That's only 2 amps. And note on this side for the Anderson power pole, no specifications whatsoever listed as to what the maximum amps or volts are. I still don't know what the maximum amps are. So as you can see, I didn't even have this thing out of the box for 2 minutes and I already burned it up. But it's not completely useless. I can still charge it using the AC wall outlet, and that's it. Now the company did tell me they are definitely going to put over voltage and over amp protection and all the other protections on the inputs. So this isn't going to happen in the production model. So I have my load tester now plugged into the USB-A quick charge port. Again, I don't know what specifications, it just says fast charge on it. But I was able to set it at 20 volts and I'm pulling 3 amps for a whopping 60 watts. That's very impressive. And we're going to see how many amps we can pull out of the power delivery port. Now there's no specifications on this, but I'm pretty sure this is a 60 watt port. So that means 20 volts at 3 amps. So let's go ahead and pull 3 amps. And there we go. We have 3 amps from the power delivery port. So as you can see, I was able to pull 60 watts out of the power delivery ports and 60 watts out of the QC ports. Now I don't know if that's by accident or on purpose, because it says all over their Indiegogo page that those quick charge ports are only 18 watts. but I was able to pull a full 20 volts at 3 amps out of those quick charge ports. So those are also 60 watt ports. I think that's probably the most 60 watt ports I've ever seen on one solar generator before. So here's the test we've all been waiting for. I'm going to see what I can do to this inverter and see if I can get it to overload and shut down. So one of two things are going to happen. It's going to overload and shut down, or it's going to fry. So we're going to find out live. I've not done this test yet off camera because every time I do something like this off camera, it blows up and I never catch it. This time, I'm going to catch it if it happens. So we got the Solar generator, which is an 1800 watt heat gun, and we have this 1875 watt hair dryer. So we're going to push this inverter until it shuts down, one way or the other. I do have the power coming up on the LEOCH itself, but I do have my actual, this is a different version of a kilowatt meter. So we'll just keep an eye on this meter and see what happens. Okay, here goes nothing. We're going to go ahead and start with the Solar generator first and put it to maximum. So interestingly, on maximum, it says 1,326 watts on my power meter and only 1,240 watts on the output of the LEOCH. Let's put it on low. Okay, there's definitely something interesting going on here. Look, that says 578 watts and this says 160. There definitely seems to be a miscorrelation between these two meters. Now I'm obviously going to trust this one over the one that's built in. So we got the Solar generator on maximum. I'm now going to go ahead and add the hair dryer to it. Alright, we're at 1700 watts here. Let's go ahead and turn the hair dryer up on high heat. Okay, we're at 1900 here, 1600 there. We're going to go all the way up on the hair dryer. Alright. That thing immediately shut down as soon as I hit 2,000 watts. Hey, it still works. Okay, let's try that one more time. We'll try to take it a little bit slower. Okay, we're right at 2,000 watts, 2,030 watts. And now it's correct. Now it says 2020. Why is it okay now, but it wasn't okay before? Well, I know as soon as I hit this on hot, it's going to overload again. Yeah, it shuts down pretty quickly after 2,000 watts. So that test shows it's very clearly shuts down almost immediately once you pass 2,000 watts. But what I'm going to do is, since it looks like I'm able to get almost exactly 2,000 watts out of this combination, I'm going to go ahead and run this for 5 minutes at 2,000 watts. And we're going to see if there's any heating issues or anything else that might be a concern if you're pushing this thing to its limit. 2,000 watts, and we start right now. There we go, no problems running it at 2,000 watts for 10 straight minutes. Now, the LEOCH did have a fan blowing out the back as long as the inverter was on, but as soon as I shut the inverter off, the fan shut off. That's kind of unusual. Usually when these solar generators get hot, the fan will continue to run as long as they're hot inside. Now maybe it's only triggered by the inverter. Let's turn it back on. That's exactly the case. So I turned the inverter off, it turned the fan off too. I turned the inverter back on, now the fan comes back on to cool the system down because I'm sure it's got pretty hot, running 2 kilowatts for 10 minutes. Now the fan noise actually isn't that bad. It's not too distracting, it's not too loud, but let's go ahead and measure it real quick anyway before it shuts off. So according to the decibel meter, we get about 64 decibels, which isn't too bad for the fan running on maximum on this. So for those of you wondering, this flashing blue light can actually be shut off by double pressing the white power button. That stops it from blinking. Thank you. I'm not sure why it has to be so big, blue, and bright. I think it's for signaling aliens or something. Let's see how bright it is with the lights out. Yeah, there we go. I think I can do the rest of the review like this. What do you guys think? So enough with the blinding, blinking blue light. There is one thing I haven't found out how to shut off, and that's this. Anytime you do anything, you're greeted with this nice, loud beep. And it's so loud, I'm going to actually measure the decibels of it and show you guys how loud it is, because it's kind of ridiculous. It's ridiculously loud. I'll be quiet. I'm going to put it on max mode, and I'll zoom the camera in. So there we have the result. About 86 decibels is that blasting beeper sound, and I have found no way to turn it off. Maybe the manufacturer will provide a way to turn that beep off in the production version. So one of the features touted by the LEOCH is the fact that it has a UPS relay inside. And what does that actually mean? It means that if you have something plugged into the AC inverter and you have the LEOCH plugged into the wall or a generator, it actually passes that AC power through the power station, bypassing the battery and all the other circuitry. Basically, it feeds the AC wall outlet power directly to your device. Now, this is very handy if you want to run this 24 hours a day to power a refrigerator, freezer, air conditioner, something like that. So if the power goes out, this automatically will switch to battery power and then continue to power the AC outlets. So let's prove that this does have a UPS relay in it, because first of all, you can hear it click, and then second, what we're going to do is we're going to use this meter, and this meter is hooked up to the input of the LEOCH, and we'll use the solar degenerator as the load, and we'll see if we run this load, is it running off the battery, or is it running off the AC power coming in the back? So I have the LEOCH plugged in. You see it pulling just over 300 watts because it's charging the battery. Now let's go ahead and turn on the solar degenerator. And if this does have a true UPS relay in it, we'll see that wattage climb. There we go. That confirms that this does have a true UPS feature built into it with an actual relay. Now we can hear this relay kick on and off as we unplug and plug in the power to the LEOCH. So I'm going to use my microphone. I'm going to put it up by the inverter. I'm going to plug the LEOCH in. You should actually hear the click of the relay. So there you have it, a true UPS. So this can be really handy in many situations because you can leave this thing plugged in 24 hours a day, 365. It'll never hurt the battery or harm any electronics inside. It'll just pass that power straight through to the inverter, and you got 4 sockets up here you can use. So does the LEOCH support pass-through charging? In other words, can you charge it while you use it? Now, I can't prove that from the solar input, which doesn't work, but I do have it plugged into AC wall power. It's currently charging at 280 watts. We have AC power powering this, DC power powering this, and we have the USB port, which you can hear is powered. Otherwise, this thing wouldn't be worth its weight in cow manure.
Manure! I hate manure!
So what do I like about the LEOCH? Well, first, I need to make this clear. This is a prototype, so it's going to look different. It's going to be a different size. It might possibly be a different weight. It's certainly going to have some different features built into it by the time the production model comes out. I mean, come on, it's a 2 kilowatt lithium iron phosphate battery with a solid 2000 watt inverter, regulated 12 volt, 60 watt QC and power delivery ports. This makes a pretty solid contender on the market. Now, the UPS feature that's built into this is something you almost never see, and I really applaud LEOCH for adding this feature in. That means you can leave it plugged in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it never cycles the battery. That means the battery will pretty much last an eternity if you use this thing as a UPS device. So you can plug in a residential refrigerator or a deep freezer, leave it plugged into this, leave this plugged into the wall, and go on vacation. If the power goes out for a couple of days, the LEOCH will keep that deep freezer going. And that's exactly what I'm going to use this for after this video is over. I can't charge it with solar anymore, so I'm just going to go ahead and plug it into the wall, plug my deep freezer into this, so whenever we have these random power outages up here in the mountains, I don't have to worry about my meat going bad. So what else do I like? The price per watt hour. Now that's at the current early bird price. It's a silly 51 cents per watt hour. Let's put that in perspective. Jackery per watt hour costs nearly twice as much as this, and the current king of low price per watt hour is the Bluetti EB240 and that's at 66 cents per watt hour. This is 51 cents per watt hour. Now, to be fair, LEOCH is not a retail product yet, so comparing it to retail products is kind of like apples to oranges. Nonetheless, it's a crazy good deal for the next 8 days. This thing is on Indiegogo. And one other thing I want to mention is that LEOCH is actually a pretty large overseas battery manufacturer, and this seems to be their introduction to the solar generator market. They literally gross billions of dollars a year, and that's with a B, so you aren't dealing with a fly-by-night, dinky little Chinese startup company. They do have facilities in several major countries, and this product is apparently designed in Hong Kong. But as with any company on Indiegogo, you should absolutely do your due diligence before you pledge for a product. Research the company, make sure they seem legit before you throw money at them. I have to say, from the research I've done and from working with them so far, they seem to be pretty legit, and this seems to be a safe bet. So what don't I like about the LEOCH? Well, number one at the top of my list is that lame 300 watt charge limit, especially with solar. The fact you can't even put 2 solar panels in series on this is a really huge disappointment. This means if you want to hit that magic 300 watt input limit on this, you need a complicated parallel solar panel setup, which requires extra wide branch adapters, and then you're going to be limited on how long you can run your extension cables. For example, most solar MC4 extension cables come in a gauge called 10 gauge or 10 AWG. That's generally about the thickest ones you're going to find on the market. And you're not going to be able to run those very long with parallel solar panels because the voltage is going to be really low. When the voltage is low and you run over a long distance, you lose a lot of power. That's why the voltage in the power lines overhead are usually hundreds of thousands of volts, because it allows that electricity to travel easily over long distances. So the lower the voltage, the shorter the cable has to be, otherwise you start losing significant power. And in the case of the LEOCH, say you're running 3 100 watt solar panels in parallel, that voltage is going to be around 21 volts. So over a run of 30 feet of MC4 10 gauge cable, you're going to lose about 5% of the power right off the bat. I also don't like the fact that it doesn't charge any faster from AC wall outlet than it does from solar. This is another really big disappointment. Pretty much any other large power station on the market will run circles around this when it comes to charge time. Now, if you're not in a hurry, or you're going to use this as a UPS, that doesn't matter. Now, the beeping and the blue lights. That's super annoying, and it's probably going to wake up anybody within 100 yards, dead or alive. Now, the production version of LEOCH really needs some way to shut off the lights and the beep permanently. Because the problem is, when you go to turn this thing on or off, it beeps and lights up. Yeah, you can shut the light off after the fact by double tapping the power button, but the fact of the matter is, it's going to light up the entire room that you're in with this really bright blue light when you first turn it on. And if you're at night in a camper or an RV, or you're outside, you don't want to ruin your night vision, this is going to blind the crap out of you until you turn the lights off. So LEOCH, I hope you're listening. Please make it possible to turn that loud beep and the lights off permanently for users that don't want that kind of bling in their life. I also really don't care for this really weird angled stealth bomber design they got going on. It looks more like an Alienware gaming PC than a solar generator. I could see myself banging up these corners within a matter of a few weeks if I took this thing outside or moved it around at all. It's probably going to get, these sharp edges are probably just going to get destroyed pretty quickly. I personally prefer a more utilitarian approach with padded or hardened corners. And I also would really like the ability to carry it with one hand. As it is right now, you got this one handle and you can lift it up to roll across the floor, but you definitely need 2 hands to carry this. You know, that is unless you're like Arnold Schwarzenegger or something, and you can probably just bench press this thing with one hand, no problem. And that brings me to the last thing I really don't like, and that's the weight. At nearly 70 pounds, if you don't have a hernia already, expect to get one. Now, this does have wheels that allows you to roll it around, but the problem is you have to bend over and crook your back while you're trying to push or pull this thing around, and it is kind of difficult on your lower spine. Ugh. Now, this is the downside to lithium iron phosphate. Everybody seems to praise it. It's like the best thing since sliced bread. But the downside to the technology is that it's big and heavy. Now, this is much bigger and much heavier than other power stations that have a 2000 watt-hour battery inside. And that's the reason. So I think this is going to be the upper limit of solar generators for the current technology. Until they can make these batteries lighter, once you hit 60 to 70 pounds, people can't move them around anymore, especially when you're older or you have any kind of back problems or any kind of mobility issues. You're never going to be able to move this thing around. So I do suggest if you get one of these, invest in one of those cheap $10, $15, $20 trolleys from like Costco or Amazon, and that'll help you roll this thing around. Now, I know the next question is going to be, now Professor, how much is the LEOCH? Well, here is the best feature of them all. The LEOCH is crowdfunding for the next 8 days as of the release of this video on November 18th, 2020. It's going for the early bird price of only $10.59. That's $1,059 for a 2,000 watt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery and a 2 kilowatt inverter. Think about that. That's just a little bit more than the price of one Battleborn battery, but you're actually getting 2 Battleborn batteries inside worth of power. You can't even DIY that much power for $1,000. And to be honest, it's worth $1,000 just to buy this thing and tear it apart and get the battery out of it for a project, and that's assuming the rest of this is junk. It's obviously not. Now, they do absolutely need to work on that solar input. That's by far the weakest feature, is the slow charging and the fact that I burned it up within a minute of ownership. That needs to be worked on. Hopefully that'll all get worked out in the final production version. But the inverter in this is smoking good. It had no problem running 2 kilowatt load for 10 straight minutes, and I didn't even feel warm air coming out the back. It seemed like it handled it no problem. That whole top section of this is the inverter, and it looks like the way they have it set up, that they have this cooling vent in the front that sucks cool air in, passes it right through and out the back. It's actually a pretty good design. So all this being said, that price is based on the crowdfunding price going on for the next 8 days. After the crowdfunding is over, I really don't have any idea what they're going to charge for this thing. I think they said $19.99. So around the $2,000 mark, this becomes a lot less of a value. So let me restate one last time. The $10.59 price ends on Black Friday, November 27th, 2020. After that, don't expect to get it for $10.59. So recommended solar for this. Now, they did send me a 100 watt solar panel, which in my opinion is pretty much pointless because it would literally take 3 solar days to charge this from dead with a 100 watt solar panel. I didn't get to plug it in, I didn't get to test it, I didn't get to do anything with the solar input. Now, I do recommend for something like this that you get a pair of the 180 watt BOUGERV panels, which you can run in parallel very easily with a pair of Y branch adapters. And you can get them now on sale for Black Friday using the code and the link in the description below. And as for the LEOCH itself, there is a link in the description below to the Indiegogo campaign. Go ahead and click on that, and you can snag one of these up for the low, crazy low price, $10.59. Again, that's only until Black Friday, and it may not even be that long because they may go up in price even before then. I know for sure, after Black Friday, they're going up. Thanks for watching. If you learned something today, don't forget to give me a thumbs up below, and if you're not a subscriber already, you know what to do. That's it for now. Till next time.
Odin commands you to like and subscribe, and clean my litter box.
So my curiosity got the best of me because the light on this side didn't work, and I'm sitting there thinking, is this just a decoration? Or is this supposed to light up too? So there were only a half dozen screws holding this thing together. I decided to take it apart and show you guys what it looked like inside. And I found some fascinating stuff.
RV Golf Guy, Z Foxfire, Jack Smith.